Hey, gathering family. Listen, wanted to give you a couple quick verses to follow up on yesterday's message. What I wish I'd said, I had some people share some other scriptures and some of the thoughts as I was walking out the door yesterday, and I love these. Here's one. This came from Cutright. So in Genesis 28. And, I was talking yesterday about how so many people say, hey, the tithe was attached to the law. And so if the law's done away with, I don't have to tithe anymore. But I shared some examples about how the tithe existed in the Bible before the law was given. Here's another one. Jacob, you've probably heard the story at some point of him seeing, it's called Jacob's Ladder. Maybe you even learned a song as a child that might not even be biblically accurate, because in that child song, it talks about how we climb. Soldiers of the cross are climbing that ladder. But in the scripture in Genesis 28, it's the angels descending and ascending. So it's not about us climbing a ladder. It's about the fact that Jacob is lying there. He has a vision of an open heaven, which we would associate with revival and healing, signs and wonders, just the blessings of heaven being poured out on us, right? And our prayers not feeling like they're hitting the ceiling. We have an open heaven. He has a vision of an open heaven, angels ascending and descending on that ladder from heaven to earth. And his response when he wakes up the next morning is found at the end of Genesis 28. I feel like it took me a long time to get to that verse. I'm sorry. Then Jacob made a vow, saying, if God will be with me and will watch over me on this journey I am taking, and will give me food to eat and clothes to wear, if he'll provide for me, like on that ladder that I just saw, so that I return safely to my father's household, then the Lord will be my God, and this stone that I have set up as a pillar will be God's house, and of all that you give me, I will give you a tenth. Now, fast forward to Deuteronomy, right? And this is where the Lord's laying out the laws. And it says clearly in Deuteronomy chapter 14, verse 22, be sure to set aside a tenth of all that your fields produce each year. So that idea of tenth is all the way through this, right? So what I want you to know is, first, when we read this story about Jacob, the tithe is not a response to a law. It's a response to the presence of God, an open heaven, his presence. Surely the Lord has been in this place, and I was not aware of it, is what he said earlier before he vowed to give God a tenth. In response to the presence of God, Jacob said, I'm going to tithe. Sometimes, maybe we talked yesterday, why do people not tithe? Sometimes we don't tithe because we're not aware the Lord's with us. Right? When we become aware of his presence, our response is the tithe. God, this is yours. Thank you for providing all that I need. Here's yours. I return this tithe to you. And the second thing is, we were having a conversation yesterday around lunch about inflation and just the cost of stuff, and it hit me while we were talking. How many years ago, I can't do the math in my head, how many millennia ago is that the right word, millennia? Sure. Did the Lord give the law? How long ago was it? And his percentage, the proportion that he asks us to return, has never increased. You and I know that the places that we shop right now, they are increasing cost of goods because it costs them more to get those goods to pass along to us. Everybody is raising their prices to try to keep up with inflation, and just the way the economy is just crushing so many people is because what maybe used to cost you 5% of your budget now costs you 8, 9, 10, maybe 12% of your budget. And yet in all of that change, from the time that this law, this principle of the tithe was introduced, it's never changed. Why? And I think it's the graciousness of God that he calls us to give proportionately, so that if you make $10,000 a month, then your proportion to the house of God would be $1,000. But if I make $1,000 a month, I look at that number and go, there's no way I could ever afford to give $1,000 a month. But God says, I'm not asking that of you. I'm asking you for your 10%, and your 10% would be 100. So the person gives 100, the person gives 1,000, but it's 10% of each of their incomes. It's 10% of what the Lord has blessed them with. And so when the law says, be sure to set aside a tenth of all that you produce. Man, if you produce a lot, then your 10% is going to be bigger. And if you produce a little, then the amount of your 10% is going to be smaller, but the proportion is still exactly the same. And I just want to encourage you with that. Start where you are, right? Don't let that overwhelm you. If you're looking at your budget going, how can I afford 10%? I'm just going to encourage you to step out in faith. Trust the Lord. Prove. Give him an opportunity to prove that what he said is true. And let's see what happens. And if you're in a position where you're making much more money than you ever thought you would, your fields are really producing some crops, don't skimp out on the Lord because your amount looks so big, because your big amount might only be 3 or 4 or 5% of what you produced. Step into the faith that God requires of you as well. Throw that extra zero on that check. Trust God. Prove that he will do what he said he will do. Whether the gift is big or small, let's all make a decision that we're going to trust God with returning the tithe, the first 10% of what he's allowed us to produce this year. Y'all have a great day. We'll see you this Wednesday night at prayer. I'm so excited to return to prayer on Wednesday nights. See you at 7.